Steven from Chainsaw Ace, back today with another video. Today I'll be looking at this approximately 20-year-old Stihl MS270. I was told that it set an extremely long period of time and will not start. Let's see what we can do about that. Okay, let's get this top cover off and see what we're dealing with here. Yup, this is a dirty boy. This is not uncommon for an old saw like this. What is surprising is that the air filter and intake appear to be very clean, which means this saw probably has not ingested much dirt, if any. Okay, let's go further and remove the air intake carburetor mount. Here I can see the intake of the carburetor is very clean indeed. This is a very good sign for this saw. Now that we have the carburetor exposed, let's check the throttle linkage. Yep, it works great. However, this fuel line looks bad and does not appear to be pliable. Yes, it's very hard. We will need to replace this. To make things more manageable, let's get this bar and chain off. I should have done this to begin with, as it makes all of this much easier to handle on the workbench. Before we go further, let's remove the old gas from the chainsaw's fuel tank. This fuel appears to be very old and has a strange odor. It's definitely decaying. I'm pretty confident ethanol from the fuel has not only damaged this fuel line, but has also damaged the metering diaphragm in the carburetor. This is very common. Before we remove the carburetor and fuel line, we need to disconnect this throttle linkage here. It's very easy to do if you simply hold the trigger wide open and place a finger on the throttle body itself. Then release the trigger. The throttle linkage will almost fall out on its own. Now it's time to pry the fuel line off the carburetor with a flathead screwdriver. Now the carburetor can be removed from the chainsaw. Let's remove the fuel filter from the fuel line. Not surprisingly, the fuel line separates into pieces when I try to grab it. Now let's remove the old fuel line from the fuel tank. Here's the old fuel line and fuel filter. You can see that they were in rough shape and really needed to be replaced. Now, let's get this carburetor apart and take a look inside. Just as I suspected, the metering diaphragm is completely hard from ethanol damage. This needs to be replaced. This should not be making a crispy sound like this. It should be pliable and flexible. Now, let's remove the metering needle assembly from the carburetor. And now let's remove the screen from the opposite side of the carburetor using a small flathead screwdriver. Here you can see the screen is clogged up and needs to be replaced. Now let's remove the other diaphragm and gasket from the carburetor. Now let's clean this carburetor in the ultrasonic cleaner. I usually set mine to 30 minutes at a temperature of 80 degrees Celsius. Look closely here and you can literally see in real time the gunk being removed from the carburetor. It's now been 30 minutes. Let's remove the carburetor and get it blown out with compressed air. Now that we have the carburetor clean, let's restore it to like new status with this new carburetor kit. Let's install the screen first. I place it in by hand and then I use a trusty number 2 pencil eraser to finish the job. Using this makes it easy to press his screen in evenly. And now let's install the diaphragm and gasket on the screen side of the carburetor. Now it's time to install the metering needle assembly. This step is much easier if the carburetor is setting as level as possible. I use a small screwdriver here to achieve this. Take your time with this step. These parts are small and are easily lost, especially the spring. Here you can see the metering needle opening and closing as it should. Now let's install the new metering diaphragm and gasket. And now let's get the carburetor buttoned back up. Now let's install the fuel line in the fuel tank. Pay attention to the straight edge on the fuel line as you can see where it fits onto the fuel tank. This will guide you and make sure you install the fuel line in the proper orientation. Let's install the new fuel filter. I used a large set of forceps to hold the fuel line out of the tank to make this step as easy as possible. Now let's get the fuel cap's retaining string in the proper place. This will keep the chainsaw operator from losing the fuel cap when out in the field. Before reinstalling the carburetor, I'm going to clean up this area a bit. This is done by blocking off the intake hole with some paper towels, so dirt is not able to enter the engine when cleaning. Now let's get our freshly cleaned and rebuilt carburetor reinstalled onto the chainsaw. Before reinstalling the air filter and the air filter intake, we need to do a couple of things. Let's replace the air filter with a new one and clean the air intake carburetor mount parts. There, that's much better. Make sure you get these two 8mm mounting nuts tight, but don't overdo it. And now for the fresh new air filter. Now let's clean under the air filter cap so we don't get our new air filter dirty prematurely. For good measure, let's install a new spark plug. I suspect the one installed is the one that came from the factory. And now let's add some fresh fuel so we can test start the chainsaw. Remember, Stihl chainsaws use a mixture of 50-1. Okay, let's see if this old saw will start for us. Awesome. This old boy still has life yet. Before I finish up this repair, I want to clean things up a bit. Believe it or not, this cleaning footage is filmed in real time and not sped up. Drinking coffee is my favorite hobby. And now for the guide bar and chain. Don't forget to hold the tip of the bar up when tensioning the chain and tightening the bar nuts. This old saw runs great and cleaned up quite nicely. I'm very happy with it. Well, this one worked out. The Stihl MS270 will live to run another day. Father Time and Ethanol are nearly undefeated. However, this time, we got the knockout. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or entertaining, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us out a great deal. Thank you.